since we didn't have a football team, the computer team was in a sense the football team. That was the team that you kind of wanted to be on. It wasn't like there was cheerleaders saying.
We'll start by getting you to introduce yourself and tell me your current position and title, and then we'll get started on the rest of the interview. Please introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Clinton Blackburn. I'm a senior software engineer at Stripe, where I've been for the last 3.5 years or so. When I'm not doing that, I'm helping out with a few other companies and organizations. I run my family's nonprofit, the Blackburn Foundation. I'm on the board of a credit union, MIT Federal Credit Union, and I occasionally sleep.
Yeah, so I was just about to say, plus you're a father to a...
And I'm a father to Adrian, who is about 9.5 months old now.
So you never sleep and you never have a moment to yourself. So that makes this time that you're giving to me so much more generous. And so thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate this. So per the interview's sort of standard procedure, I really want to know what got you started in technology. And so we'll go all the way back to as young as you can remember. What's your first memory of working with technology or technology in general? Like what sparked this for you?
Wolfenstein.
Love it.
Like the early Wolfenstein, the shareware on the floppy disk.
Yep.
My aunt and uncle worked in tech in a sense that they worked at tech companies, but on the business side. So my uncle, he did finance and accounting for Texas Instruments and Network Associates and other companies. I think Dell at one point as well. And my aunt, she was on the sales side of things. So I think she worked for CompuCom and a few other companies. I'm not sure how many people remember CompuCom, if it still exists. So when I would go to their house in Round Rock, I would get to play on their computers and play Wolfenstein and other games, my cousins and I. And my dad was into Macs at the time. And so this was around the time of the LC2, I believe. So he had an LC2 and later, I think the Performa Tower. So I was always playing on his computer as well, back when AOL came out. So all the way back when AOL would, toss out floppy disk in the mail, like I don't know what, before CDs. And so that was what got me hooked. And from there, it was typing classes in elementary school, I think around 3rd or 4th grade. We also had the LC2s and those monitors and Kid Picks where you blow stuff up essentially, and Oregon Trail where you blow stuff up. That's where it all got started.
I remember that. Yeah, I remember the Wolfenstein on the 386, the very square hallways and everything, and everything was sort of like 2D but in 3D space.
Yes.
It really was just so magical compared to anything else we had seen before at that time. So you mentioned that right away. You have you seen, there was this show on Netflix, Halt and Catch Fire. Did you see
Heard of it? Never
that?
seen it.
Okay. When you mentioned all of these sort of classic computer companies, the Texas Instruments and CompuCom, I assume was the same. Halt and Catch Fire was this dramatization of the computer business at that time. And so it was a really interesting, like, dramatic representation of the era. So you mentioned that you got into typing classes in elementary school. So that was the start of your, that's not really formal programming education, but it's certainly more exposure to technology. And then did you grow up in an era when programming was taught in high school? Did you run into this in high school then?
Yes. So by the time I got to middle school, I was doing HTML. This is, I guess, CSS, but not really CSS, mostly HTML. Oh, dude, even before that, it was GeoCities.
Oh, wow. Yes.
Yeah. Clint's Gaming Zone. It's really weird. But now there are people who make money off of this. Essentially, for all the video games I would play, I just would find the cheat codes and I would put them on Clint's Gaming Zone, or I would link to other sites that had them. And naturally, I had the marquee text and the scrolling ants and the blinking text because it's HTML, and I was like 9 or 10. What else are you gonna do? So I guess that was some of my early programming days. Even later on, back when front page was still popular, playing around with front page servers as well. But 8th grade is when I really got started into actual programming. And then even 7th grade as well. I had a really good teacher, Mr. Fleming. He was a computer literacy teacher, and he was just like, you're beyond this. Don't worry about this. Come help me build a computer. So we would just go and build computers while everyone else doing Microsoft Word or whatever. And that's where I kind of really got the hardware bug. But at the same time, I was doing Java in 8th grade with a different teacher, Mr. Labarge. So we were doing Java, trying to do like basic animations. I think we made a bicycle animation, and I made a Pong game that if you missed it, it played a little wave out that said player 1 sucks or player 2 sucks. And that was kind of the start of programming. But then high school rolls around, and turns out we have a computer team. So some more context. I went to a magnet school in Dallas, Texas, science engineering magnet. And the way magnets work, unfortunate history, it's part of desegregation court order. And so they made these magnet schools and academies. I went to an academy as well for middle school, where instead of going to your neighborhood school, you go to the school, you apply to the school, and it's kind of like the top tier middle school, top tier high school that anyone who applies and gets in can go to. So because of the nature of the school, we didn't have a football team. It was actually 6 high schools in one. So inside Townview, the building and the campus was science and engineering magnet, talented and gifted. It was kind of like a liberal arts, health and social services, business, I'm forgetting education, and law and government. So you had these 6 different magnet schools, and SCM, my school, is where since we didn't have a football team, the computer team was in a sense the football team. That was a team that you kind of wanted to be on. It wasn't like there was cheerleaders saying, "Yay, good!" If
I was like, going to ask,
we had a band and we had cheerleaders for the whole campus, but they never showed up to the competitions for number sense or for math or computer science. They were always
so
at other things. I know. Also a drill team. Now thinking about it, they went to other people's teams' games. So I was on the computer team. So we had like a little lab of computers we made up, and we just go and code at the time C++. My principal, Mr. White, we would all go to his house, and he had like a lab in his basement area. So like about 10 of us would just code on Saturdays for maybe 2 or 3 hours, I think, around like 10 until noon or something like that. And that was, practice. And I remember the first thing they tell you is like, go get the book, how to learn C++ in 24 hours, learn it, and then you can code. And so that was our Bible. And we essentially kind of like, I think, USACO to some extent, USA Computing Olympiad, you get different problems with different points, more difficult. And it's just practicing those problems, learning the various patterns. And so ultimately after 4 years, I'm not sure if it was junior or senior year, but ultimately I got a letter jacket for computer science.
Wow.
Because the way it's structured in Dallas and Texas is you have UIL, University Interscholastic League. And so you have the district competition. So the District of Dallas, I won Dallas. I was the top programmer in 2004 in Dallas. And then you go into regionals and state. Went to regionals and we bombed, but it's okay. With my school, you get a jacket for winning at district. And so we all got jackets.
That's incredible. What a world. I'm a little bummed about the cheerleaders, but somehow not surprised.
Okay.
So you make it to varsity, letter jacket, the hero. And so is that how you got into MIT? What was the process of doing that like?
Related story, but not quite the same. Same principal, Richard White, goes to my mom during parent conference, the positive parent conference, where it's just like, come and meet the teachers, not meet the teachers because your kid is terrible.
Yeah.
So he's just like, Mrs. Blackburn, your son's going to MIT. At the time, MIT was just a pipe dream.
Right.
Or not even pipe dream. It was just that school that you see on in movies and TV. I hadn't even thought about it, but that planted the seed, and I got connected with a mentor, coincidentally from Texas Instruments, Alan Gilks, class of '68, and he kind of talked to me about MIT. He was volunteering in kind of the various labs that TI supported, and he supported directly financially. And a few years later, I got the big envelope in December of what, 004 or 03.
Yeah.
And it's the big envelope. That's the one that's like welcome. It's the small envelope that's regrettable.
Yeah.
But I got the big envelope in December, and that was my Christmas present to my dad, which is more of, hey, I need some money.
That's right. Yeah. Merry Christmas. Here's a very expensive present that you have to buy.
Yeah, I owe him a lot of money.
That must have been just a great day, though, right? That must have been
really,
really exciting. So you move to MIT, and where geographically is that? Because I'm Canadian, I don't know much about the school locations.
If you ask some of my family, they think it's in Mexico, but MIT is in Massachusetts. It's the Massachusetts Institute of Technology up in the Northeast. If you know where Boston is, just go across the river to Cambridge, and there you are.
Okay, I've actually been to Boston, so I know that. Nice. So what was your entry into school like? How did you, what were you learning right away? Was it a fire hose for you? Was it, how did
That's the right word.
Yeah.
Fire hose. MIT actually has a saying, sipping from the fire hose. And the idea being that you're just inundated with lots of information and knowledge, and you're just trying to get a little bit of it. And so coming from high school where I was kind of top of the class and going to MIT, it's just like, oh, I don't know anything. You quickly realize that just because you're top of your class, in Dallas in a magnet school doesn't mean you're top of the class at MIT. It's a whole different world. So not gonna lie, it was very stressful. And I didn't finish in 4 years. I finished in 4.5 years because there was this one semester where it's just like, this is really hard. And I dropped down to 2 classes, but it turned out to work out pretty well. But it was a big adjustment. But I think for me, knowing that I had a good family support back in Dallas, and so it wasn't like, oh gosh, if I fail, I'm just done. My life is over, which unfortunately is how some people feel. I had a really good support system, both back home as well as within MIT.
What were the major things that you took away from at least the first half, or just up until the point where you started to specialize?
Definitely time management is something we learn early on in MIT, almost the first day, when you have, classes giving assignments and whatnot. Plus, if you're thinking about joining a fraternity, the rush week is also happening. So you have a frats are like, hey, come to our house or whatever. So you quickly learn about time management. That plus any other extracurriculars. And so for me, time management was a big one, but I also wanted to make money to pay not only for MIT, but just, other expenses, life expenses. So I started working at the help desk, and that's really where I learned how to help people, how to research problems and find solutions. It's a lot of Googling, I'll be honest. You don't know everything when you're working at the help desk, and we're supporting like a few dozen different applications across both Windows and Mac, and a little bit of Linux. So I learned a lot about troubleshooting from the MIT computing help desk, and that's really, I wouldn't say it's the best lesson that's I've carried from MIT, but it's been a really significant one as I've dealt with debugging and whatnot in my programming career.
Right. So if you're going through university, you have your first bit where you're still sort of fungible, and then maybe year 3 and year 4 they start focusing really into a topic. Is that how it is there as well? And
somewhat, you can decide. And this is for anyone listening, this is the circa 2007, 2008 curriculum, because it changed around the time I was leaving, actually. But at that time, you could kind of decide if you want to be a bit broader. Actually, I'll back up a little bit. So the department that I graduate from is electrical engineering and computer science. Typically, other universities have them separated. And so with EECS or EECS, you can actually choose, do I want to be, and we do numbers in MIT. So this department is course 6. And so you can decide if you want to be 6-1, which is pure EE, 6-2, which is a blend, or 6-3, which is pure computer science. I started out on the blended track. I got through, again, everything's numbers, 6002, which is our circuits class. I burned so many resistors or transistors in my hand. And then we got to the crazy resistor networks, and I was just like, this is not the life I want to live, and promptly shifted over to 6-3, and I've been coding purely ever since. But yeah, that's the first kind of specialization you can choose, if you want to blend it or pure EE or CS. And then within CS, in my case, you can decide, do I want to study, or go into detail on operating systems or distributed systems or AI or anything, and it's up to you. But there's also I just want to be, take a broad approach. And as long as you're getting like the minimum number of courses, you have to go deep to some extent. So in my case, I did a little bit more focus on bioinformatics. So that last semester, that extra semester, it was actually pretty cool because I had spent some time at a hospital in India where trying to do some work, but we realized we didn't have enough data, and then actually kicked off an interest in collecting medical data and studying bioinformatics. So I think the most specialization I got was those 2 courses in bioinformatics, actually.
Yeah. Okay. And what do you feel were the biggest lessons you pulled from that time? And we can go all the way up through to graduation there. So just, or over the biggest lessons from your university career, or the second half where you really start to hit your stride and know your stuff.
It's not directly related to engineering, actually.
Good.
It's more life lessons, really, which in my case, it's more of keep an open mind, be open to opportunities. That advice was literally taken, and I got this from a freshman advisor, actually, Susan Brown. And that has literally taken me around the world, in the sense that after freshman year, between freshman and sophomore and junior year, we have a program at MIT called IAP, Independent Activities Period.
Okay.
So for the month of January, people are on campus, but typically you can go and do your own thing. You can do nothing, sit at home. You can participate in some extracurricular courses or just competitions like robotics competitions, or you can go and do a program internationally if they're available. And in my case, I visited Kenya and Zambia during one of the IAPs. I spent another one in India and did another one back in Ghana on various programs. And so that was all because some folks knew that I, was good with computers and could help troubleshoot on the ground. And I had the open mind of saying, yeah, I've never traveled internationally, but I'll give it a shot. I did have some fears, but I made it work. And so I've been able to use that throughout my career of just saying, I'm going to keep in mind about this and make myself available to this opportunity and see what happens. And it's been pretty good.
That's wonderful. I love that. And absolutely. One of the points of this podcast, YouTube show, is about talking about the whole career of computing. So if there are things that you learn that are life lessons and wisdom, absolutely, we want that. Almost even more so, because diving down on the details of Kotlin versus Java on the low level JVM, it's just that's appealing to one programmer or two, whereas this stuff about life lessons should apply to virtually anybody at any phase of their career. So thank you for that.
We can dive deeper there later if you want.
Anywhere you want to go. So we graduate. From here, did you get your first job day one, or was there a bit of time where it was, yeah? And
Day one.
day one.
In my case, so the reason I do not regret graduating a semester late is I made a whole lot more money over the course of my career because of it. In the sense that I should say that for me, my family is not really a tech family. I mentioned my aunt and uncle working at technology type companies, but again, they work on the business side. They didn't have any context for the engineering side. And by the time I was out of school, they were not even in those jobs or roles anymore. And so the only person I had to look back to in terms of what's it like to work in tech was my brother. And we're 12 years apart. So Lou had worked for Hewlett Packard for his entire career. And I think he was still at HP at that time. And this was back before they even split. So graduating, I had done internships with both Hewlett Packard and Texas Instruments. And I had offers from both companies to work. And yeah, and so, but the salaries were low relative to what I ended up with. So my salary, and I have no issues talking numbers. So my salaries from HP, the offers from TI and HP were around like 65 or 70K.
Okay.
My offer from Vistaprint, which is where I ultimately ended up, was 95K. Yeah, I had no clue what I was worth. And I didn't even know that I should go and talk to the careers office or whomever else at MIT to say, hey, how do I, we talked about negotiation, but I didn't have a good starting point. Yeah. And so there was this deal at one of the buildings on campus, a status center, where Vistaprint had a table essentially, and they said, hey, give us your resume and we'll give you 253 business cards. I don't know if you've seen the commercials for Vistaprint, or Simpress is the parent company now, I believe. And so I gave them my resume. I got some business cards. I think I still have those business cards actually. And I also got a job. And that set me up. I had a really good mentor to start, Travis Dunn, who I think is now at like DraftKings or someplace, one of those gaming type companies. And so he kind of taught me the ropes of how to build good software, how to make sure it's tested, but I think more importantly, I learned how to put software in production. As I like to say to many folks who talk about MIT, MIT taught me to be a really good computer scientist and kind of do the theory and some mechanics. Vistaprint taught me to be a software engineer in the sense that, yeah, I have some code, but I can actually put it in production. I can monitor and observe it and fix it if I need to, and make some money ultimately. I forgot what the question was, but that was the early days for me.
Well, yeah, no, that was a
first job actually. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great, your first job, the great story of how you got into it. One thing that I think I heard that I don't know about, like I've learned about today, is, are you saying that universities have career offices that tell you how much you're worth on the open market? Because salary data is really hard to come by, especially when you are just starting out. So, I mean, man, I wish I knew
on
that.
The university, but the MIT Careers Office, I forget how frequently they survey students, or I don't know if it's just like when you immediately graduate or maybe a year after or longer. But yeah, MIT's Careers Office collects data from recent graduates to understand where the pay scale is for different degrees and different roles. And in some cases, I believe, don't quote me, I'm saying this on a public feed.
It's recorded for posterity.
Yeah, I know, right? I want to say that if not MIT, I've definitely heard of some schools having a no negotiation, no haggling clause. And that the idea there is to make it simpler for students to get the roles and kind of have equitable pay, essentially. So if you think about like I discussed, coming from my background, I had no clue about how to negotiate or what I should be paying. You can see the same in data for women, especially women in STEM, where they're getting paid, what, like 70%, 80% in good days of what men are being paid. And so if you come in and say, hey, here's students can't negotiate. Everyone gets the same pay scale or pay amount. Then you set everybody up on an equitable playing field from the start, and you don't have issues down the road when you're negotiating future roles.
That's
absolutely fewer issues.
Yeah, that's absolutely brilliant. I didn't know about that, but it just makes such a big difference when starting out, because you're graduating at what, 20 years old or 22 years old, and somebody comes up and says, I'll give you $65,000, and you think, that's more money than anybody has ever seen in their entire life. And you sign on the line, and there are these 5 other people over there who are going to say, oh no, but we'll do 95, but you'll never talk to them. So that's a really wonderful thing to hear about. Certainly a valuable piece of information for anybody watching. Now, the other one that you said was about the skills of moving things into production. And that's something that I've noticed as well, is we have so much theory coming out of universities and things, but not so much on the side of like using Git or revision control. I imagine if you're graduating around 07, 08, that was probably still SVN was the...
I believe I used CVS when I did my internships at TI and maybe HP, and then SVN definitely at Vistaprint initially. I don't know if they transitioned to Git.
Yeah, and then Git has sort of taken over the world and everybody, but I think gaming is probably still Perforce, but anyways, I mean, but, and also there are some questions. What are the lessons that you learned about working in production right when you started?
I learned that I can burn a lot of money with a bug. Honestly, I learned to learn from the mistakes. I remember with my first production bug, I was working on the marketing automation team. That's what they're called now. I forget what we're called then. But essentially, it's the team that made the tools for the marketing team to produce, various promotions. That we have this term called PPP, price, promotion, and program. And essentially, it's this code that's the query string argument, and that determines all the pricing and all the products you see on the website. And I won't get into any details, but essentially we're the team that helped set much of that up for the marketing team. And I was working on parts of the internal tooling as well as the email system. So the original email system was built in Visual Basic using XML and XSLTs. And I think I can't remember exactly what the first bug was, but there was at one point over my time at Vistaprint, I sent out a lot of email that should not have gone out. I spammed a lot of people, is what I'm saying. And that one didn't cost any money. In fact, it probably made money because more people saw the emails. But there were a few where some stuff probably cost the company a few $1,000s, and I felt bad. And this is the first time I'd done it. Again, having not worked in this sort of environment, I thought, oh crap, they're gonna fire me. And I was just demoralized for a few days until my manager was just like, it happens. Also, it's just business cards. Like, it's not that big of a deal. I was like, oh, okay, yeah. So I learned how to, come back from those sorts of failures and incidents, and also just how to better test my code so that those don't happen again.
Yeah. So, okay. So that's good. I like the stories of these worst bugs we've ever had, or the expensive bugs, because
I probably cost Vistaprint in lost revenue about as much as they paid me. Sorry.
And now, speaking about why you moved on from Vistaprint.
I did not get fired.
No,
I left.
yeah. Yeah. So I had your resume up here a second, or your LinkedIn up, and it says you were there for like about 2 years.
Just short of 2 years, yeah.
For sort of 2 years. So did you start getting the itch that you like? Did you say, I've learned everything I can learn here? What made you decide to go?
Oh, I was stupid and egotistical. um, um, I'll back up. That was also another good lesson. I learned to get a hobby from Vistaprint because I was breaking so many things. My boss was just like, dude, you're working too much. I was a workaholic. Do something. And then I went crazy on hobbies and got like, I did piano lessons, photography, improv, and baking lessons, and I got crazy. But what made me leave Vistaprint? Yeah, I was egotistical in the sense that I thought, oh, I should be a senior engineer by now, not knowing that, senior takes a while to get to. And I was like, I'll go someplace else and make more money and get a title. And so I went to a startup and I made more money, and I got the title of lead engineer when it was precisely me and the CEO.
Right. Yeah. One of my other interviews was my former CTO, and I asked him how he got his title as CTO, and he said, well, I was going to quit otherwise, and there were only 3 of us, so I got to be the CTO. And so I see. So lead engineer. And what was that like? What did you get from the startup experience, from the, I mean, if there's only 2 of you, like, the whole show is on your shoulders.
To some extent, yeah, which is crazy that I was entrusted with that level of responsibility. And by the time I left, we were around 7 people. I think it was just still 2 of us or so in engineering, me and the architect and the CEO, moonlighting, and then everybody else was in sales. What did I get from Exaprise? I learned Git, actually. That's where I learned Git. We used both Ruby on Rails for the web backend, and we did some C# for the clients. To explain what Exaprise is, Exaprise was came before a lot of the hosted services for Microsoft, for Microsoft as well as Google, or around the time of Google. So we were saying, okay, if you have hosted or in-house Microsoft Exchange, we will scan all the data on your Exchange server, and we'll tell you, should you stay with your hosted system, with your internal system, should you move to a hosted version, externally hosted version, or should you go to Google, which is going to potentially save you lots more money. And so we had the web backend that collected data, and then there are these clients that ran on the Exchange servers that were built in C#. So I got experience with both kind of desktop software to some extent, as well as more of a web backend with the Rails side of things. And then I was doing all the CI servers, so setting up Jenkins servers, and we had a VMware server in-house. Again, this was kind of pre-cloud, or not pre-cloud, but before everyone
nascent cloud was for like, sure.
Yeah,
right? So
exactly.
Those are really the early days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is like late 2010. I think I started there in December 2010 through 2011 almost. So yeah, I got a lot of experience with just running raw hardware, and as well as some of the software that runs on it.
Okay. And that one, it didn't last as long, but what made you
like my dad? It's like, you sure you didn't, why are you leaving the company so soon?
So yeah, what made you move on from the next one, or to the next one? Or...
Yeah, I got a better offer, and I think it was just a personality mismatch.
Yeah. Okay.
So the CEO and I didn't always see eye to eye, and it was stressful at times.
Well, and on top of that, if you're a company of 7 people, where your entire livelihood is tied up in this thing that you're doing, it's inevitable that you have the risk of, I mean, it's a very high stress situation.
Yeah.
Two engineers, That leaves 4 sales
5 or so. So yeah, 4 or
5
5,
or
I think, yeah.
I guess so. If the CEO probably makes phone calls, and if the stuff doesn't happen, the business goes away, and so from paycheck to paycheck, you're probably wondering if you're going to still be there next month, right? Like it's,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, we didn't necessarily get down to like, oh, we have a day of runway left,
Yeah.
but I think at times we were down to maybe a month or a few weeks of runway before were able to secure more funding.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was stressful, just kind of always wondering, will it work out? Will it not work out? And again, it was just internally, we just did not always see eye to eye.
Yeah.
And our communication kind of tolerances were different. So yeah, I made the decision to leave and join a different company.
Yeah. Well, getting out of a high stress situation seems like a really smart move. I think. So you got the offer and you jumped to it, and where did you land? What were you doing
I
in this next
landed
place?
at Kyrus.
Yeah.
With a K, Kyrus. And Kyrus was a company that was now in Boston proper. Others were in like Lexington and Waltham. And Kyrus at that time was focused on using physician payment data to help with conflict of interest disclosures. So what does all that mean, Clinton?
What does that mean?
So as part of Obamacare, or I forgot the actual name for Obamacare.
It's Affordable Care Act.
Affordable Care Act, thank you. As part of the ACA, there is also the Physician Payment Sunshine Act, or PPSA. And what that meant is that all of the pharma companies who were paying doctors had to report that information publicly. Pay doctors, what are you talking about? Well, those ads you see are not necessarily for you on TV, they're for your doctors. And so you have doctors who are getting 6 figures in many cases from their salaries, but they're also getting 6+ figures or 6 figures from speaking engagements, or from writing / endorsing papers, or just random gifts. You know, someone brings in, you know, cake or wine or steak dinners, that sort of thing. And so doctors, surgeons, whomever, are getting all these different payments. And the idea was that we could say, hey, here are kind of like, if think of NASCAR, like here are your sponsors. Here are the sponsors for your doctor, so that when they recommend this drug to you, you have the complete information, and you're asking, are you recommending this to me because it's the best drug, or because you just, you know, took a cruise with a pharma company last week? So the idea was that for grant proposals where you need to disclose these conflicts of interest, we would say, we've already scanned this data, we've put it into a system. We had essentially a database of as many, I wouldn't say all doctors in the country, but a significant number of doctors and the payments that they received. And so when it's time to do your conflict of interest disclosures for your grant proposal, you just go to the Kyrus system and boom, it's there for you, and it's automatically done for you. That, it turns out, no one wanted to pay for. Why?
Yeah.
Right? Because the assistants usually did all that work. It did not take away from any of the doctor's time, and the assistants were cheap compared to the doctors. So while we did partner with a few institutions to trial this and make it work, unfortunately, no one really wanted to pay for it. So Kyrus pivoted with similar data, in the less of the financial side, but more of, we know who these doctors are, we kind of know where they went to school, and we know what their specialties are. And so when you get a referral in some medical healthcare systems, it's basically saying, hey, call this number, this not hotline, but call center for the hospital, and they will help get you with your next appointment. So let's say, I gotta remember what my doctors are. It's podiatry's foot. So let's say you have an issue with your foot and you get referred to a podiatrist. You call up the call center and you say, I need a podiatrist. And in some cases, in the best of cases, it's an Excel spreadsheet that someone searches. In the worst of cases, it's sticky notes. And probably the worst cases is just a random person who knows who all the doctors are and knows it from memory. So if that person's out, you might not get your referral that day. So we said, we have all this data, pretty simple, put it into a search backend, and boom, that's the SaaS that the hospitals can use. And you can just search for your podiatrist. And so we have that in some of the call centers. In other cases, you can just go and do it in a self-serve fashion. And some of the cool things I built on that were scheduling. So we're able to pull in scheduling data as well. And you kind of like with Yelp, whether you say, are they actually open right now? You could say, can they actually see me within the next week or two? And therefore just eliminate any irrelevant results from your search.
That's, you know what? I spent 10 years working in pharmaceutical marketing, and they would pay you if you would sell that to Fortune 500 mega pharma, like Pfizer, for example, right? They would pay if from their branded website for Viagra or whatever, you say, enter your zip code, click find now, and it goes through and it lands on your database with a dozen doctors highlighted in your area, and it says has bookings in the next 2 weeks. They would pay you through the nose for each, probably just for landing, like probably, you know, that's if you sold that in the right way. But you left, and it doesn't
matter. Hey, I'm still a
now.
shareholder. I actually exercised my options.
Well, you should call them
I
up.
learned a few things. Yeah, speaking of money and not knowing anything, I did not exercise my options from Exoprize because I didn't know I was supposed to. I did learn a few things when I left Kairos, so I did exercise my options. So I do have some shares in Kairos, and I can recommend that.
There you go. There you go. So that's we don't have to break that down within the context of this interview, but you know, if you want to talk about how it works, I can actually point to some samples of places where I have implemented this, and I don't know how much they made, but it was enough that the business is still running. So
hey, ping me after this. Let's do it.
We can absolutely talk after that. So let's talk about, is the next step the one where you got the itch to leave Kairos, or were you headhunted into?
A bit of both. So the director of engineering at Kairos left Kairos to join edX, which is the online learning initiative from MIT and Harvard. Fast forward about a year, and I do get an itch to leave Kairos. And lo and behold, he can now headhunt from Kairos, or poach from Kairos. So he reached out after he learned that I was interested in leaving, and I went their interview rounds at edX, and that was about 4 years of good time at edX.
Okay, and what kind? I mean, a learning platform. Obviously, you're going to learn some stuff, but what did you learn about? What did you learn about working in tech at that time?
I think the biggest lesson there was that tech can actually help people. Yeah. In the sense that I think by the time I left edX, I'd been there for 3.5 or 4 years, so forget how long. And I won't take complete credit for all 6 million learners, but we helped in some way 6 million learners. And at least 1 million of those occurred within my time at edX. And it was just that, yeah, we can have an altruistic lens to this and still make money. We still make money. I didn't make like FANG level money, but I was comfortable. But yeah, we can make money and also help people at the same time, and just do good with my superpowers. Yeah.
So is that when you got the itch to also, when did you create your foundation, or is that?
The Blackburn Foundation came about in 2009. So,
so earlier.
Yeah, around the time, shortly after I left MIT. And it was a foundation I started to honor my grandmother, Dorothy Blackburn. She was a teacher. She was a math teacher in Dallas. And then she was a teacher My dad's an educator as well, ranging from band teacher to principal, school board member for many years in Dallas. My uncle was a teacher, an aunt on my mom's side was a teacher. My brother's now a teacher. So we have education has been really important to my family. My grandmother was actually one of the first, or the first in her family to get a degree. My dad was the first in our family to get a doctorate. So the foundation was founded to honor her by giving scholarships to those who want to be educators. And then also to just give back to the Dallas community. So while my dad was on the school board in Dallas, he would throw pep rallies at the local schools. And so that was a time for parents and students to come and learn about different programs within Dallas ISD, and as well as you would get like raffle tickets for your report cards. Like an A was 3 tickets, a B was 2 tickets, a C was 1, that sort of deal. And you win prizes that we had donated, so like iPods and gift cards and whatnot. So just a really good time to come and celebrate and honor academic achievement in a similar way that we would, celebrate and honor, athletic achievement.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. So you did edX. You learned about the true power of software is just the way that we can scale, right? It's you create this thing that's super valuable for one person and digitally copy it, as you say, 6 million times to, change lives. There are people in the United States who are working today because of the programs that they learned through edX, and they probably have incredible jobs. There are the people who learn machine learning and they walk into $100,000 plus per year jobs. And so what an incredible resource to have. But you moved on from there, and what made you leave edX and go to, and where did you go? I'll leave the spoiler for you.
Ooh, suspense is killing me.
Yeah.
And I already know the answer. Let's get edX for just a little bit.
Sure. Yes. Anything you want to tell us?
Yeah. So you mentioned like the impact on lives. So when I mentioned that I had gone overseas to Africa a couple of times, part of that was working with OpenCourseWare, which to some extent was the predecessor of edX. So OpenCourseWare was MIT's first initiative, and it was just, here's a syllabi and the programming, the practice exams and tests and whatnot, and the homework. We're not going to actually teach you. There's some videos. We're not going to really run an assessment, but you have the information here. Do with it as you will. And so we had some really cool stories. For example, folks learning different engineering concepts and actually using those to improve lives in their towns or their villages overseas. And I want to say that one of the learners from OpenCourseWare eventually ended up at MIT, due in part to some of the knowledge he picked up from OpenCourseWare. So it's kind of like a self-fulfilling cycle there. And one of the last programs I worked on at edX was MicroMasters. And the idea there was you would do about 6 months to 12 months worth of coursework, a semester to a full year of coursework. And then for certain programs, not all of them, but MIT had one for, I believe, supply chain management. You could say, hey, I've earned my MicroMasters, so I've proven that I can do MIT level coursework. Now, let me into the residential program at MIT so I can get the full-blown master's. And I was on the board of the MIT Alumni Association about a year or so after I left edX. And so one of the coolest things I got to learn was that we had some of those early learners were actually graduating around that time, and they had gone through the MicroMasters and they had earned their masters, and we got to welcome them into the full-blown MIT Alumni Association, and that was a really touching moment.
I had no part of this, and my heart's exploding. So it's like you must be so proud. Like, oh,
totally.
Man. That's really wonderful. And just what a way to change the world and sort of uplift everyone around you, but to give education away for free. And it's problematic in terms of how does somebody find the time if they're living below the poverty line, they work 2 or 3 jobs to take care of their kids, and they do this on the side. So so I'm still pro basic income. I'm not saying that, but it's like, giving it away, and the impact of that in terms of real life change is it's staggering. And that's the power of software, right? You could not do this in the physical world. It's the digital space that allows this to happen. So is there anything else at edX that we want to talk about, or?
Yeah, and it works the transition to Stripe, which is where I am now.
Sure.
And so in terms of like, what did I learn at edX? It wasn't just, that, I can change the world in an altruistic fashion. I also just learned to be a better engineer, in the sense that it wasn't anything technical per se. It was the human side of engineering. And I've been guilty of this, but definitely coming into MIT, it was just give me the engineering courses, all this, the humanities stuff. I don't care about that, because in MIT, we had to take a writing class freshman year. And I think we had to take 8 humanities courses, or 5. Either way, a lot of humanities courses for someone who only wanted to study computer science. So I got to, learn like Japanese history, some Indian history. I think I definitely did a class about cinema. And I can't remember the others, the writing class.
I had at least 2 of those as well. I also did Japanese history, and I started in a film studies degree.
Nice.
Although I actually never did computer science. I did psychology, but I had courses.
Probably more important. That actually leads to what I'm talking about, which is essentially I learned that, the technical side, that's easy. It's the psychology, it's working with other people, whether it's customers, program managers, product managers, engineering managers, just teammates. That's the hard part. And that's where I really leveled up in that sense at edX. I had a great manager, Zach Rockwell. And he's like, I see a lot of me rather in you. So let me help you not make the same mistakes I made.
Right.
So the book that I always recommend to folks who are asking, like, what can I do to be a better engineer? What got you here won't get you there. I think there's like 20 different facets or items where you can say, okay, you're exhibiting this trait, and here's how you can fix it. And I forget I haven't looked at it in a few years. I need to go in and review it to see where I fall now. But that book really helped me, and then Zach's mentorship.
Yeah. What's a funny coincidence actually is I'm not going to look at my phone and scroll through, but right now I'm actually listening to another book by the same author and a woman that he partnered with, called How Women Rise. And they keep mentioning what got you there won't get you here, or whatever it is. And I'm thinking, oh, well, I need to know about the rest of this, because they should, and so I've actually got that on my list of things to read next.
Nice.
So we don't have to spoil that, but we should tell anybody watching that this is supposed to be, and you've endorsed it. It's a very good book, you say. Okay. So
it will help you get out of your own way and see where you might be adding too much value is one of the issues that some people have. So that just helped me become a better communicator, a better team member, a better everything. Overall, less of a dick. I'll be honest. I was a terrible teammate for probably a year plus, and that I think put me in a much better place to eventually leave edX and go to Stripe. There's this saying: people don't leave companies; they leave managers. Could not be further from the truth. I wish I could have brought Zach with me. it was tough leaving because I was growing and learning a lot, but ultimately, while I was definitely being fulfilled on that part of being an engineer, that kind of human side, I found that I was getting less fulfillment on the technical side,
Right.
and I just wanted to kind of step up a rung or so, to just go and do a deeper dive on I wouldn't say bigger technology, but different technology in a different field.
Right. Because I mean, at edX, you absolutely have scale because you are delivering
Yeah.
videos, you have this service that needs uptime, and
Yep.
because you're giving away a very valuable product for free, you probably have very high traffic. And so,
It's also all open source,
and
almost all open
yeah,
source.
so
So we
you,
also have to help maintain, not help maintain, but assist others. I just remember I have an email from someone asking about edX in queue, help others with their sites and manage the releases of the open source repos and software.
right. Okay. So there are hard engineering problems involved, but clearly Stripe is just, it's got to be an order of magnitude
Yeah.
because you're doing like probably 2 orders of magnitude. You're doing
Yeah.
payments, credit card, you know, if your free university course goes down for an hour, it's probably not as big a deal as like your credit card processor going down at
Yeah.
1,000 restaurants for 5
Yeah.
minutes. So
it's crazy. We see ourselves currently and ultimately want to be considered the infrastructure of the internet to some extent, the financial infrastructure of the internet. So if you think, oh, I want to put a server online, AWS probably comes to mind, if not Google Cloud, Azure, and go down the list. If you think, oh, I want to collect payments online or in person, Stripe should come to mind. And why Stripe? Because it's reliable, because it's fast, because everybody else is doing it to some extent. You can't go wrong with Stripe. It just works. And that means we need to have really high uptime, really high reliability and availability, and also just really good low latency and performance.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie. I have had the occasion to look at the API documentation for Stripe just recently, and it's really nice. It's really it's really good API docs. So
that's what won me over. So when I was at or part of what won me over. One second.
Yeah.
When I was at X, a friend who I worked with at Kairos actually, Dave Gandy, who runs Font Awesome and produces runs Fonticons, which produces Font Awesome if you've ever needed the font library. He was going through YC, and I think that's how he came across Stripe. And he was like, hey, you're working on payments, because at the time I was building out the e-commerce microservice for edX. You should check out Stripe. And so for context, we had integrated with CyberSource and PayPal. CyberSource, their documentation, unfortunately, still is it's terrible. That's a nice way of putting it. It's terrible. Even to this day, it's terrible.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt there? So we should just caveat this with, your opinions are your own and do not represent those of Stripe. But
very true.
Yeah. But now you can say a competitor is terrible without actually,
True. But I will also give credit.
I can edit that out if you want me to too. It's not.
It's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
So the CyberSource documentation is not ideal. Beautiful. So it took us about 2 weeks to integrate with CyberSource, a full sprint for us. And that included reverse engineering refunds. We were talking to our account rep and asking them, okay, if we're doing this secure acceptance, how do we do refunds? They're like, oh, you can't. And so we figured out how to integrate a SOAP client with Python, and using their SOAP API generate refunds. It's cool, but it's also sad that it had to happen. So 2 weeks. PayPal, slightly better, also a competitor, slightly better. And it took us about 2 days or so. Still okay, but in 2 weeks. I remember Dave told me about Stripe. I also came across Braintree during my research. I was watching something on Netflix. It took me about 4 hours to do both.
While you were doing it.
While I was distracted by Netflix.
Yeah.
Sure, we kind of had some of the foundations in place within our system, but the raw integration of just edX to Stripe, edX to Braintree, about 4 hours total. And it's just like, oh, they're on a whole nother level because the documentation was amazing. We didn't have to talk to any account reps or anything. It was just, you have an account? Okay, go forth and collect money.
That's right. You just copy and paste working code over and it just goes. Like,
yeah.
I won't get into detail about the stuff I was looking at, but it was, I mean, or I could, because it is, it's promoting your company, but it was really great. It was really great. And I have one of the problems I have, I'm not going to denigrate PayPal, but I'm not the biggest fan of them all the time either. But okay, so did you try the product and say, this is amazing, I have to work there? Or
I tried the product around probably 2015, 2016, I think is when I tried it. And it wasn't until around 2017. It's funny, at some point I found the blog post, but there was a blog post that was linked from Hacker News, and it was something along the lines of Stripe supporting scientists, this open source library, not quite for A/B testing, but for comparing, I'm gonna get scientists wrong, but essentially Stripe was supporting this open source library. And at the top of the blog post, there was a banner saying, hey, we're hiring, click here to apply.
That's how they get you.
That's how they got me. And, every year and a half, it's just like, okay, let me see what's out there. I'm not necessarily fed up with my company. It's just seeing what's out there. And so I dipped my toe in the pond and they just sucked me in. Stripe has had and has the most amazing hiring process, in my opinion. And this is not me as a Stripe engineer. This is me as, even if they had rejected me, I would still have said, man, that was a really cool process. So I've gone through and been rejected by Facebook, Amazon, and Google. All three relatively the same. Here's one of these leak code style problems. You got 45 minutes to an hour. Good luck. And as we all know, it does not relate at all to the role that you're actually going to end up doing. And it's, in my opinion, just not a good way to screen candidates and filter or reject them. What Stripe does is a bit different. So you still have the recruiting screen, somebody looks at your resume. Then you have the phone screen where you're, the phone's remote Zoom. It was never really a phone, a Zoom screen where you are working through a problem with an engineer on the line who's kind of your guide, so to speak. And some might call them leak code light, leak code medium, in the sense that, yeah, they are problems that require some form of an algorithm or to solve, but it's rooted in an actual problem that Stripe has faced. So it might be, hey, order these invoices or order these payments according to some fashion that the customer might want, or move money between bank accounts so that we don't go bankrupt today or we're not considered bankrupt because you have to balance all the accounts at the end of the day, that sort of thing. So there are problems that even if you haven't worked in fintech or in the financial realm, you can at least say, oh, this makes sense. It's concrete. Yeah. What I think is the key for Stripe's interview process is that for nearly every round of it where you're actually having to produce code, you're using your own laptop, or one will be provided for you if you were actually on site, but you have access to your own laptop, and more importantly, have access to the internet. And as I tell people, you can look for whatever you want except for how do I answer this question in the Stripe interview. Why? Because that's how we actually code in real life.
Yeah.
If you say to a carpenter, hey, go build me a house, but by the way, you can't use a nail, like, what? Why would you do that? Like, you've just taken this person's tools away from them. Or to a painter, paint me a fresco or whatever. But you can only use black, or just handicapping people unnecessarily. It just makes no sense. So why would you not want to give people the best opportunity to showcase their best selves by making sure they have the tools available to them? Yeah. So in my case, I had my laptop, I had my IDEs, I'm a JetBrains fan, so I like PyCharm, whatever. And that's another thing, you use the language that you like. So a lot of people do JavaScript and Python, but you also have Java, C#. I've seen like 1 or 2 in C++, Ruby, obviously, because that's what we use throughout Stripe. And so you are giving every opportunity to showcase your best self, and we try to put as few handicaps in there as possible. So the problems are well-grounded. You have the tools you need. After that phone screen, it's about, I think, 5 or 6 rounds on site. Used to be on site, and somewhat similar in the sense that you're maybe doing some debugging or bug squashing, as we call it. You might be trying to integrate against an API that you might not have seen before, or just, again, like a regular programming coding exercise, just to be like, okay, can you actually code, just to make sure.
But we're saying, but it sounds like you're saying a little more than just solve the algorithm, right? So it's you start with that algorithm as a separator, and then it sounds like it moves into practical, real world skills. Find the error in this block of code, which is
very important.
50% of our day some days, 80% of our day some days, and then and you said a couple of other,
So everything, like you said, is more practical and related to the actual role. We do have like design aspects to it, and you mean talking about where you want to take your career wise, but throughout all of it, kind of goes back to what I mentioned, those soft skills, so to speak. We care about how well you communicate, and really that's a big one that relates to the interview, but how well you communicate, both and ask questions of your interviewers, but also tell us what you're thinking and how you're operating, because I can't remember exactly, but there have been cases where it's just like, this person did not finish solving the problem code wise, but they communicated well enough, and I know that if they had been given 5 more minutes, they would have solved it. And we passed that person because like, again, the real world, you can fudge deadlines occasionally, so it's perfectly fine.
That sounds that sounds really nice, because so many, I mean, at least I have personal experience with real anxiety around, because I've done the Amazon loop, the one where it's 4 or 5 interviews on a whiteboard in this room, and just this strange location, and the stress of that is so overwhelming that it really it actually knocked me out of applying for jobs for about 5 years, because I just didn't want to go through that. I thought, nope, I'm happy where I am, I'll just stick around. But
I feel the same way now. Even now, we found each other via the Experienced Dev subreddit. I see these folks posting about elite code or in CS career questions, and it's just like, I don't know if I could do it. I gotta make sure I don't screw up anything here at Stripe, because I don't want to go back into that grind anymore. It's just not ideal. There is before I left edX and before Stripe, I actually did interview with one company, and they started asking brain teasers, and I was just like, I'm out. I just left. I got through like maybe the 2nd round. I was just, I'm not going to answer these questions.
It is. They're stressful. They don't have anything necessarily to do with the job. Although, so one of the other things I've started doing is I do elite code a day. So I do just one every day. Like, so instead of doing maybe a Sudoku or a crossword puzzle, I'll just try and do one a day. And I don't do every day, but I feel like if I keep that up, maybe the muscle will be trained enough. in 3 to 5 years when I'm interested in looking again, because it's you just keep it going, keep it at a low level so I don't have to do this buckle down grind.
Mm-hmm.
It's a theory. I'll tell you in 5 years how it works, but we'll see.
Just come work at Stripe. We won't deal with any of it.
Yeah. So what else are you learning? So now we've had the interview process and this,
Yeah.
you enjoyed it, you got in, you loved it. And then was this another fire hose? Because you really are 100x on just in scale and stuff.
You would think so, but not necessarily, not initially. So in my time at Stripe, I've been at Stripe now for 3.5 years. I started out on the billing team, and the billing team at that time supported invoices and subscriptions as products, and now has grown to support a few more products. And Stripe is processing a lot of subscriptions every day, but especially on that first and last day of the month. And the scale, it's a huge scale, but it's not like we're manually processing it. So for the most part, I was not oblivious to it, but I didn't have to think about it at the scale, because it was just make sure the code works and test it, and boom, we're gonna process some invoices, we're gonna process some subscriptions, and it wasn't terrible. Now what I'm working on, as I'm working more on pure payment stack, we are trying to evolve our payment stack to, again, make it more reliable and more performant. Now I have to think about that. And like down to the level of how many database writes are we making, and how can we shave that even further, because we know that that's going to be the most the highest source of latency in our system. So now we're at a different level of thinking. We're also, as we're evolving this system, changing some of the older models. And so as we interface the new with the old, it's how do we make this interoperable and performant at the same time, and at different levels, from our pure code level, in this case Ruby and Java, to our data warehouse side of things. So now I'm thinking more about the scale as opposed to where I was about 2 years ago.
Right. Okay. And that would happen as you get more responsibility, I would imagine, too, right? Because as you become more senior, you become more trusted, they give you the harder problems, and you're now supporting the new entrant, new to Stripe devs, not necessarily completely new in career. And so that makes a little sense, the lay of the land and everything. So how do you learn where do you go to learn this stuff?
We have a really good team of engineers, of staff engineers and higher. And when we recruit staff engineers and those at higher levels, we're looking for people who have kind of been where we're going. So I can rely heavily on a team of folks within Stripe to answer questions. Can't always Google things with us, because just our implementations are so different, and in some cases we are treading new path and new trails. So it's definitely no longer a point where it's just like, let me Google this. How do I process payments, with limited latency? And it's like, that's not Google at this point. So
yeah. So you really are on the edge of inventing new things.
To some extent, yeah.
Yeah. What is your, so I have just gotten a role as a staff engineer myself.
Congrats.
Thank you very much. But I am at the end of my at the start of my second week, or mid-second week. So from a selfish perspective, what do you get from a staff engineer, and what should I do to be good at my new job?
It's a good question. So if you've seen me peer over here to my right, it's because Slack is still open and I keep seeing notifications, primarily because I don't know how to do not disturb. Oh, there it is. New OS. And now I know how to do DNS or D&D. I get I would say I get a lot of mentorship in the sense of someone saying, hey, it's two different levels. So on the one hand, it's here's a problem that is somewhat vague and broad. You go off and solve this to kind of help you get to the staff level. Because if you think about staff level, it's take this vague, weird problem and provide clarity. So I'm getting kind of just pointers to the projects to work on. And then within those projects, it's, okay, you've got this part covered, but what about this other thing, this other unknown? Go and solve that. So it's a lot of pointers. It's a lot of review of my work to say, this is good, but it could be better, or it's really good. It's good. And then it's a lot of communication. So saying, okay, I say to the engineer, I need help with this. And they're like, oh, I was in a meeting, or I saw in the Slack channel, whatever, that so-and-so is doing something in this area, go talk to them. To this day, I'm still not sure how they are so well connected, but they are. And so it's just having someone who has not only been where you're going, but is also remains in the various rooms and channels where they can be a conduit of information for you. Not to say that our communication is inefficient, but some people just hang out in so many Slack channels, and it's just great to say, hey, you're everywhere. Tell me who I can go to now, and I don't have to go through a kind of a Slack chain.
Yeah. Okay. So I heard they do connections for you. And they do mentorship. Is that like sort of career coaching? Like they say, this is a really juicy problem. I want you to move into your next, I want you to have these opportunities to move into the next level of your career.
Yeah.
Take on it. Okay. So it's career coaching as mentors and mentorship, super connection. And is there any points where you walk through code with them, or you walk through because I mean, there was stuff like, oh, go talk to this person who really knows stuff. But is there things where you say, this is my problem, I'm trying to solve this, and they say, okay, tell me what you are. And actually you did say that. You said that they point out the things that you may have not thought of. So it's almost like, the story of the debugging duck, right? Where if you just, and so it's like they're an interactive duck to some extent. So okay, so those are things that I can take away with me to try and be okay at my job going forward.
Just have patience. Lots of exercise, lots of patience.
Is there anything that this is just open floor now, I think. Is there anything else? Is there anything else about Stripe that you want to talk about? And if not, what are you really passionate about? And maybe tell me. Yeah.
In terms of Stripe, I cannot escape paper checks.
Yeah.
So in the segue in between me working on billing and working on payments, the payment stack is paper checks. Close to when I joined, one of my early projects was building out paper checks as a payment method. And if you're thinking as you hear this, that makes no sense for a digital payments company, I agree with you, but it actually does make sense. So when you have merchants or users, as we call them, users who want to send out issue invoices, sometimes customers want to pay with a check, a mailed check. You're in Canada. Are checks a thing as much in Canada?
Oh, absolutely. And
I'm so sorry for you.
Most of my banks have a system where I can take a photo of the check now with my phone.
Remote deposit capture.
Yeah, the front and the back, and I just deposit it from right here. And so, barely anybody does a check anymore, but it's fine.
Well, you'd be surprised.
Me. Yeah.
So on a B2C or type of scale, few people using checks. On the B2B scale, a lot of people using checks. I forgot to get the data, but if I recall correctly, in like 2017, when the US Federal Reserve did their triennial study, and they've updated it since, obviously, being every 3 years, something on the order of like tens of billions of checks, or tens of billions of dollars worth of checks were sent through the system, also worth billions of dollars. So checks are not small, a small amount relative to like you and our net worth, relative to the rest of the financial system, like 5% or so at the time, or something really small. But it's a lot of money. And if you think about a company like Stripe, where volume is important, processing checks can be lucrative. So we had many users who wanted to get paid via check, and we built out paper checks as a payment method. And over time, I became kind of the last person holding the run book for paper checks and the de facto owner of paper checks as a product. And that was a really fun project. In fact, I was just in a meeting about a follow-up to it. And it's just really cool to see a system where you have little pieces of paper going through the mail, and they go through this system. They're actually hand encoded to some extent. Like people have to open the envelopes. There's a machine that opens the envelopes, but people have to take, this paper, put it through a scanner and whatnot, key in data. It's really interesting. And it may sound inefficient. It's like, oh, you have people doing this, but it's actually really efficient once you see it in person. And you go from a mailed piece of paper to digital money within like 24 hours or less. And it's really cool. And it was one of the projects where it's not a career making project, right, but it was a cool project to work on, and to kind of be associated with. And that's been my funnest project at Stripe.
Oh, that's really cool. So, I mean, and it's funny, right? Like, it's not always the zestiest project, or the one that's really going to make you mint you as a millionaire, but it's just something about it that you like.
Yeah, and that's honestly part of what Stripe is trying to do, in the sense of, sure, we could have just said, oh, we're not going to take checks, it's not important. But we were like, hey, this is important to our users.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure we capture their business and capture their income in every way we can. And we built it out.
Yeah.
But there are far more important products from a revenue perspective, from many perspectives, but this one was important in the sense of goodwill. And it's actually helped us land a few deals, because they're like, oh, you have checks? We like checks. And yeah.
Okay. So that's really, I mean, that's a really good point about the need for high-end customer service too, right? You
yes,
have this customer focus. You do this thing that may, as you say, maybe 5% of your customers want it, or maybe 5% of their transactions.
Yeah.
But that 5% is the one thing that they get completely hung up on. Yeah. And they wouldn't sign with you otherwise. So it's a really interesting sort of thing. Actually, so I guess we are sort of nearer to the further end of your career. We're almost in the present day. And right off the start of the interview, you told me that it's been 9 months since the birth of your son. And I've got a real question for you around that, because you said earlier on that you are a workaholic, and you learned at one point about being, you learned at one point about picking up hobbies and things. Yeah. And then how has having a son changed your work style, your work outlook? How do you view work now? And how has it changed your life in terms of your relationship to work? And, you can also just gush about how cute it is to have a little kid around too. I'm okay.
It is cute. He is adorable. I heard them come back, my wife, and he came back. He might make an appearance, who knows? But as you can see, it's changed my life in the sense that my office is a baby's room.
Yeah.
And he takes a lot of attention. I'm no longer a workaholic. I haven't been a workaholic for a while. I do occasionally fall down a rabbit hole of wanting to solve a problem, and my wife hates it. But she pulls me back out. It has definitely made me think more about how my time is spent.
Yeah.
So, and also what that time is doing. So if we think about work, it's okay, work is still fun, still important to me, but on a more visceral level, it's paying for daycare. Honestly, it's like I gotta pay for daycare now. Daycare is across the street, and we can see it. And daycare is the second biggest expense in our household budget. So I think a lot about daycare and making sure that Adrian is set. Not only for current day in the sense of, he has what he needs to eat and be well fed and be taken care of, but also down the line, making sure he has funding for college or for whatever else he wants to do in life, and is not struggling. He's not gonna be a trust fund kid going crazy, but we're gonna make sure that he has options, to say the least. And so that changes things. But now just a lot of my time is just spent playing with him, and thinking of things that we can do and do with him and buy him. Like we have a parenthoods channel. That's a good thing to talk about. That's Stripe. We have the parenthood Slack channel, and it's one of my favorite channels. One, because you can see pictures of cute
kids.
Right.
Yeah.
But also because it's just a really cool community where if you have a question, you're probably going to get a lot of answers and a lot of input, and it's going to be really good stuff. Or you can answer it. So I made a document to help new parents and say, okay, here's a link to my blog post of all the stuff that we bought and didn't buy. And other folks have now contributed to say, here's what we found successful. So it's just a really cool community. So I like being a part of that. But yeah, ultimately, it's just, he's basically introduced a more important focus on time and making sure that he has a good amount of time with me. And I'm actually present, not just on my phone all the time, but actually present and focusing on him. And then, like I said, just making sure that he is prepared, not only financially, but also just prepared to enter the world. He's only 9.5 months, but still, you gotta get started early.
That's fine. You talked about the blog post that people were adding things to. I started thinking, oh man, should we do a parenthood Git repo where we can accept pull requests from all? Anyways, I was just thinking, that's, oh wow, that sounds like a project.
I would love to see someone do a baby in a box product. We've talked about this within Stripe for a few folks. We just don't want to build it, of someone just saying, hey, maybe you have, name your tiers, silver, bronze, silver, gold, whatever, something that's a bit less gaudy. But just like, I want to be the simple parent. So in our case, we have like the Kiko brand stroller versus the people who are the Uppa babies and $1,000. Our stroller costs like $400. No way we're spending $1,000 on a stroller. It's about $400 or so. So give me that low end, mid tier, whatever you want to call it, that baby in a box. So the simple, crib or bassinet, the basic changing pad, and just for the stuff that you use every week or every month, just have it on a automatic delivery of sending me formula every week, giving me diapers every month, etc. So free advice, free idea to somebody who wants to build it. I'm happy to tell you more about what you should build.
Happy to sign up on that. So from back to a technology perspective, after we nerd out on being dads for a little bit, what are the big, is there anything that you wanted to talk about, or anything that you're particularly passionate about right now? So
no, I'm a dad now, so that's my life.
Yeah, and that's entirely fair. I think that's you know, I
No, yeah, I don't have any current projects to nerd out on. So yeah, nothing
yeah, maybe
at this point.
sleep. Maybe sleep is the project that you would like to
Mhm.
get some of. I know what that's like. Well, then I think that we have touched on everything that we have to talk about. And Clinton, thank you so very much for this. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed
Yes.
talking to you, and I think that there is some really great wisdom that I think some people can pull from you if they sit through the video. So
Yeah.
thank you very much for your time. And yeah, and honestly, if you want to talk about the actually, I'll stop recording.